All right. So the first supplement we're going to talk about here today is choline bitartrate. And in fact, I have right here, I prepared for this. I have a bottle of choline bitartrate. This is a new brand, a new label that has just come out on the market. It's a collaboration between Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. It's called Acme Supplements. You probably can't see it. I don't know if the camera picks it up. Acme Supplements, choline bitartrate. All right. Glorious looking bottle there. Wonderful label. They had to hire several graphic designers to get this done. Now, looking at the label, I noticed the supplement facts are wrong, so I'm going to have to contact Wile E. Coyote or Mr. Coyote because that's a violation of FDA guidelines. Whenever I try to talk to Roadrunner, I just get beep, 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 beep. So, whatever. All right, so choline bitartrate. This is not a real supplement, folks. All right, if you didn't get the joke. Choline bitartrate is a combination of, choline, duh, and a conjugate base of tartaric acid. So let me go back. Let me reverse here a little bit. Choline bitartrate in total is what's called an amine salt. So we're going to cover all this. So choline bitartrate, you have choline and then a conjugate base of tartaric acid. So we'll start with tartaric acid first. What is tartaric acid? It's a compound that's found in many fruits. You have like citric acid, which is found like in citrus fruits, lemons, limes, etc. Well, tartaric acid is found in other fruits. It's in, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, it's in like berries, strawberries, etc. If you do any reading on it, you'll see it often referred to being in grapes. And we're going to get into kind of a little bit of like the wine making process because that's mentioned as well. So tartaric acid is usually associated with grapes if you do any type of reading on it. All right. So we know that. All right. So conjugate base, what does that mean? Conjugate base. So this is where we're going to show our first diagram here. So wish me luck here as we try to do it. I'm going to have to share my whole screen so you'll see my wonderful screen. And then I will do this. All right. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. And I'm checking the live feed to see if it comes through. This is a molecule of tartaric acid right here. All right. These here, so you have this OH, 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 OH in 4 different places. Those are, I'm not a master at chemistry, so last time I took chemistry was in friggin' high school. So those are hydroxyl groups. All right. So keep that in mind. This is tartaric acid. There are 4 hydroxyl groups. All right, let me stop sharing here. What is that? And then now I'm going to bring up another diagram. Give me a second. I have too many windows open, folks. Too many windows open. That's what I want right there. Maybe next time, learning curves, maybe next time I should bring these images up in my browser because it does allow me to share the browser window and it'll probably be easier to do it that way, but oh well. We're already in it, so no big deal. All right, let me share my screen again. I gotta click that. Okie dokie. So, all right, I can see if it's sharing correctly here. All right, that should be sharing. Let me open it up all the way. There we go. This is a molecule of choline bitartrate. Choline is up here. We're not really worried about that right now. All right. This is bitartrate down here. All right. So if we notice here, there are only 3 hydroxyl groups. 1, 2, 3. The 4th one, the hydrogen's gone. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because it may be causing some delay. All right, so we're back. So tartaric acid has 4 hydroxyl groups. Bitartrate has 3. Right? So essentially what is meant by a conjugate base of tartaric acid is, let's say you have on the right, you have tartaric acid with its 4 hydroxyl groups. And on the left, at least on the left, on the left you have bitartrate with only 3. Essentially what's happening is the hydrogen, what's called a proton, it's being removed from tartaric acid, and then it can go to bitartrate. All right. So essentially, they can flip just by that one hydrogen ion. It can go from tartaric acid on the right over to bitartrate, and now bitartrate becomes tartaric acid, and tartaric acid becomes bitartrate. That's what it's meant by conjugate base. At least that's how I understand it. Is they can go back and forth just by the change of one atom there. All right. So that's a conjugate base. Right? So now we go back to what I said, kind of like the definition of choline bitartrate. It's an amine salt. What the heck does amine salt mean? Well, we'll start with salt. By salt, Howard, do you mean table salt, like what you put on your French fries? Well, no and yes. And I say it in that way for a particular reason. No, when they say it's amine salt, it is not like table salt. No. Yes, in that table salt is a salt. Right? So in chemistry, a salt is a compound that combines the positive charge of what's called a cation and the negative charge of an anion. So when I say salt is a table salt is a salt, the positive charge is sodium, Na. The negative charge is chlorine, or Cl, negative. You combine those together, sodium chloride, table salt, it is a salt. All right. Amine. What's an amine? So an amine basically is a derivative of ammonia. And if I'm remembering this right, this is strictly off my memory. Ammonia is NH3. So it's an atom of nitrogen and 3 atoms of hydrogen. It's that stuff that you can buy it in the bottle to clean like your bathroom, and it's got that powerful smell that wakes you up. That's ammonia, NH3. So I'm going to share another, let's see if yeah, that's what I want to share. Okay, I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen here. So we're going to share my entire screen again. Sometimes it takes a minute for it to come up. I will give it a second. All right, so I believe, let me minimize it to make sure it is. Yeah, it's on there. Okay. It just delays a little bit on my end. We're not going to worry about this bottom part here, trimethylamine. We're going to talk about that later. This is trimethylammonium. So again, an amine is a derivative of ammonia, right? So NH3. This here, this trimethylammonium here, this is an amine. This is also, let me minimize this. If we go back to this, there we go. This is the trimethylammonium here of choline bitartrate. It is part of the choline molecule. There's a trimethylammonium. I don't remember the whole name. It's like trimethylammonium, blah, 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 blah. I don't remember it, but yeah, the important thing is this is the trimethylammonium part here. So choline is an amine. And let me bring this up here. Nope, sorry, wrong screen. Yeah. This is basically what it is. You have nitrogen. You have 3 methyl groups, which I talked about in the previous episode. So I'm going to try to describe it just to make sure people understand if they're listening. Basically, you have nitrogen. In 3 sides of the nitrogen, you have a methyl group, which is CH3, so an atom of carbon and 3 atoms of hydrogen. And then you have a hydrogen at the top, or I should say at the 4th connection to the nitrogen. Now, just based on what we were talking about previously with conjugate base, trimethylamine and trimethylammonium, I guess in this case, they're conjugates. So I believe trimethylamine, I may be wrong on this, is the conjugate base of trimethylammonium. All right. So that's a little bit interesting there. Okie dokie. So let me stop sharing. All right. So back to it. So essentially my whole point with saying this is that the choline molecule itself is the cation. Okay. The bitartrate is the anion. Right? Those two together, positive and negative, you have a salt, an amine salt that uses choline and the conjugate base of tartaric acid. So pretty sure I explained that. Again, hit me up with any questions you have on it. I will do my best to answer. So I guess the big question is, why? Why is it used this way? Why are you mixing choline with, this conjugate base of tartaric acid, putting them together? Why not just use choline? The reason being is because when you use this salt, this bitartrate, it improves solubility. So basically like dissolving like in fluids, the idea of dissolving in the body's liquids, and it improves absorbability, improves bioavailability. That's the reason why it is used that way. I'll give you a couple of examples, I guess real world examples. So baking. So in the wine making process, when grapes have to be fermented to make wine, a substance is created called potassium bitartrate. It is a salt. Potassium's the cation, bitartrate's the anion. Potassium bitartrate is also known as, AKA, cream of tartar, which I think is used in baking for like anti-caking or what's that stuff, like a thickening agent? Not sure. I remember when I was a kid and I would go with my mom to the grocery store, and we would see I would see in the baking aisle a container of a cream of tartar. And I always thought as a kid, like, oh, I guess that's what they use to make tartar sauce, like to dip your fish sticks in or something like that. So, but no, I mean, maybe it is, I don't know. But as far as I know, no, it is not used to make tartar sauce. That is a salt that is used that people could probably use every day and they didn't even think about it. Now in the medical field, I'll give you like more of a professional, Vicodin. And I think one of our episodes of 5 Deep, Harmony, the bliss broker Garcia, talked about how she was taking Vicodin. I forgot the context in which it was. Well, Vicodin combines hydrocodone, and I think there's also acetaminophen, which is like Tylenol, bitartrate. It uses the conjugate base of tartaric acid, which is bitartrate, and then combine that with hydrocodone in this case, and then you get a salt. So medical companies, or I guess pharmaceutical companies, use it as well to improve bioavailability. All right, so that's a long way of explaining what choline bitartrate is, I guess, on a molecular level and the reason why it's that way. So something else I want to mention is all these 3 supplements, I'm going to be going through like what I have is like positives and negatives of it. So I'm going to count that for choline bitartrate from Acme Supplements, brand new brand. I'm going to count that as a positive because, mixing these two together, creating this amine salt, and it improves bioavailability, which is good. That's what you want. When you take your supplements, you want your body to be able to utilize as much of it as possible. And that's what you're paying your money for. It's what you're taking it for. So I'm going to mark that ching in the positive category. Another positive is the choline content by weight. So let's just say this, I didn't put it on here, but, pardon me. They didn't put it on your Acme supplements. Let's say this choline bitartrate is Jesus, that didn't focus too well. All right, let's just say it's 1,000 milligram capsules. All right. Well, choline bitartrate is about 41% choline by weight. So out of that 1,000 milligram capsule, about 410 milligrams of it is actual choline. One second. I had to get some lemonade there. Throat's getting dry. Well, some of you might be thinking, wait a second, 41% choline. I mean, Howard, I'm buying choline bitartrate in order to get choline. How is 41% choline by weight? How is that, how is that a benefit? Well, I'll tell you right now, the second ingredient or the second supplement we're going to be talking about, CDP choline, it's less than half that choline amount. So again, there's positives and negatives. And when you compare it to the last one, alpha GPC, you'll see it's a positive. So overall, I'm going to call it a positive because compared to CDP choline, it's high. It's more than double the amount of choline. So that's another positive. Another positive, I guess this would be the third positive of it, is cheap. When compared to CDP choline, which is the second choline supplement we're going to talk about, and alpha GPC, which is the third, choline bitartrate is cheap. Now, with all the supply chain issues going on and everything, that may have changed. But from my knowledge, from what I remember, choline bitartrate is the cheapest of the three. That doesn't mean it sucks. That just means it's the cheapest of the three. And that's good for manufacturers. It's good for brand owners, and it's good for consumers, the end consumer. For manufacturers, I'm working with the manufacturers right now to make the pre-workout. It could be a benefit to them because if you have a client being like a brand owner like me, and they say, well, I'm not really sure what ingredients to put in there for like nootropic factor. Hint, 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 what we're going to talk about. Nootropic factor. Then the brand owner can say, well, okay, we have alpha GPC, CDP choline, and choline bitartrate. Well, alpha GPC and CDP choline may be too much money, but yet then they say, well, we have choline bitartrate. It's a form of choline and it's cheaper. And then it can fit with the consumer, the manufacturer being the brand owner, me. It can fit with our budget. Because I can tell you right now with the pre-workouts, they're not cheap. Yeah, they're not cheap. But that's also with everything else going on in the world. So another positive is that it's, for the most part, it's cheaper than the other two ingredients. And it's good for brand owners, me, because it lowers the cost of production. So that's good. And then for end consumers, if you're buying just a bottle alone of choline bitartrate, then it'll be cheaper than the other two. At least it should be, it's depending on the brand. But if you're buying it mixed in with like a pre-workout or a nootropic blend, it may or may not lower the cost because there's a lot of factors that go into the cost of those products. But overall, I'm going to mark it as a positive that it's cheaper. So that's pretty much the positives for choline bitartrate. The negative, a big negative, at least to me it is, and that is choline bitartrate has issues. It is inefficient. I won't say ineffective because it can, but I'll say it's inefficient. It has some problems crossing the blood-brain barrier. So essentially, it means it has trouble getting into the brain. The idea is you get an increase in the amount of choline in the brain. Your brain can then use that to make acetylcholine, which is ultimately what we want when we're taking a choline supplement for nootropic purposes. You increase acetylcholine, then it helps. It can help with focus. It can help with attention, and your body uses it. I mean, right now I'm moving my arms, and I'm talking and everything like that. I'm breathing. Well, my body's using acetylcholine in order to help facilitate that. Without that, as we talked about in the previous episode with the what was it? The bombing in Japan. I forgot when it was, by the cult. I forgot the name of it. It's been so long, I forgot the name of it. But they used sarin gas, which was developed by, I don't know if YouTube likes to use me to use the word or not, by the evil folks in Germany back in World War II. It's actually the sarin. I think it's SARIN. I think, if I'm right, those are the initials of like the scientists that created it. It basically, it blocks your body's ability to break down acetylcholine. So you get a toxic level of acetylcholine built up in your body. And then the people who died, they basically choked to death because they can't control the muscles to help breathe, because you lose control of it, because acetylcholine is vital to motor movements. All right. So back to it. It is ineffective. I almost said it there. Inefficient at building up in the brain, significant amounts in the brain. Well, a way to get around that is you take more choline bitartrate. You just increase the dose, which we'll talk about dosage here in a minute. So blood-brain barrier, I mentioned that. Well, what is the blood-brain barrier? So I'll go into that here for a little bit. So in our body, we have the circulatory system. It's basically how blood can circulate through the body. All right. You have arteries, which arteries carry blood away from the heart. So my heart beats, and then the blood goes out through the arteries to the rest of the body, to my head, to my arms, to my organs, to my feet, whatever. Veins carry blood back to the heart. All right. So let's use the example. I'm going to use my my camera angle. It isn't wide enough to capture the massiveness of my arm here, my huge left arm. It's huge for various reasons. But I have my big old bicep, especially the forearms get big on that, if you get my drift. I have my big old bicep here. And because we're going to talk about capillaries, this is where the magic happens, in the capillaries. So, we have my heart here, it beats through the artery goes, to the arm, and then capillaries actually feed into the muscle. They feed into the organs. They feed into the brain. And the capillaries are the smallest of the three. And the walls of the capillaries are very, very thin. All right. So they allow substances to go through, to, diffuse in and out of them. All right. So we'll just stick with oxygen, since I can probably safely say, out of all the nutrients and substances that are in the blood that the muscles, the organs, all of our body, our brain needs, the most vital of which is oxygen. Without oxygen, you start to die pretty quick within a few minutes. So, again, the capillaries feed into the bicep in this instance, and the oxygenated blood go through the capillaries, and then the oxygen can go through the walls of the capillaries, and then carbon dioxide can come back into the blood, the waste products. But then oxygen can be used for, aerobic respiration, if you're, whatever, you're doing bicep curls, whatever the case may be, sitting around doing nothing. All right. So I think I'm going to try this, folks. Let me see if I can do this here. We're going to take a risk here. We're going to see if this works. Give me a minute here while I come up here. All right, I'm going to try this, and then I'm going to share my screen. Let's do, I'm just going to do a line here. Boom. Boom. Let me minimize, and let me share my screen to show you my wonderful creation. As I'm waiting for it to come up on my screen. And I apologize in advance for any delay or anything on here. Here we go. I apologize in advance for any delay. I am using the conference room of the apartment. The Wi-Fi signal seems to be pretty strong. At least that's what YouTube tells me. The connection was great. There's a new Wi-Fi here, so that's awesome. But there may be some lags. I prefer to do it at home, but the son is at home, and he's can get pretty rowdy. So, all right, you can probably should be able to see my screen. I can see it on my phone. This is my wonderful depiction of a capillary. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci would be jealous. He's like, wow, that is amazing, your work you did there, Howard. So, yeah, there's basically, for anybody listening, it's two parallel lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this. It's been forever since I've used paint. Boom. Let's try it again. Boom. All right, let's do 3 here, 3 here. So all I've done is I've basically drawn, well, it says ovals, but they're horrible looking ovals on the top and the bottom lines. All right. They're maybe about, well, for me, an inch apart. All right. Of course, this is supposed to be a capillary, and these circles are endothelial cells. All right. We talked about endothelial cells in the episode on citrulline, because that goes into the whole idea of vasodilation, expanding the blood vessel walls, capillary walls to help get more blood into the muscle, etc. This is obviously not to scale, but in between these endothelial cells, there's these spaces, like these 1-inch gaps. Well, that space allows for more substances to come into the bicep muscle, my huge bicep, and then out of the bicep. It allows for that. However, in the brain, the capillaries in the brain, the density of the endothelial cells is much greater. So what we're going to do is we are filling the gaps of the the capillaries with the endothelial cells in the bicep. In the brain, those gaps are much smaller. There's a higher density of endothelial cells in the capillaries of the brain. So this prevents a number of substances from coming into the brain, from the blood to the brain, and then vice versa, from the brain back into the blood. Those endothelial cells act as the blood-brain barrier. There's a lot of substances you don't want getting into the brain. I mean, I could think of one would maybe be like bacteria, viruses, certain compounds, etc. You want to try to prevent those from getting into the brain. I believe the blood-brain barrier also exists in the spinal cord as well. All right. So choline bitartrate, because there's a gap, you can see if you look closely, there's little tiny gaps there. So there's still gaps there. Maybe that's how they get in. Okay. But the density of those endothelial cells in the capillaries is much denser in the brain. So that, again, acts as the barrier, but that also means that choline bitartrate has more problems, inefficient at getting into the brain. So you have to take more of it. That's the big negative with choline bitartrate. Let me stop sharing my screen. So that leads us directly into dosage. All right. The dosage of choline bitartrate on the low end, it's about 250 milligrams. That is for what's called, quote unquote, general health. If you're not really concerned, for the most part, with nootropic benefits of choline, then for choline bitartrate, it's 250 milligrams. When I say general health, it's for the health of the liver. So in the previous episode, at the beginning of the episode, I talked about choline bitartrate being vital for liver health. And I used the example of people being fed through a feeding tube that lacked choline. After a time, they developed non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is a precursor to cirrhosis of the liver, which is scarring of the liver. And the doctor, and I forget the doctor's name, I don't even remember if I said it or not, he discovered that if he put choline into the solution that they were being fed through, that after a time, the non-alcoholic steatohepatitis cleared up. And in that episode, choline on my mind, I just left it on at that. I just said, oh, well, that proves that choline, or at least indicates that choline has some contribution to liver health. Well, later in this episode, we're going to go into, later in this episode, we're going to go into exactly the mechanism by which choline can assist with liver health. And it's a big one. So it may not be the only one, but it's one that I read about, and it's vitally important. All right. So that's the low end, 250 milligrams, all the way up to 3,000 milligrams, or 3 grams. Now that 3-gram level, that's where you're getting into like your nootropic, where you're getting enough of it to get into the brain. I mean, that would be what? Roughly 1,400, I mean, it's a little bit less than 1,400 or so milligrams of choline if you're taking that much over the course of a day. And with supplements, everybody's different. Somebody may be able to take 250 milligrams of choline, and then they get a nootropic benefit from it. Other people may have to take, 2,000 to 3,000 to get the nootropic benefit of it. The person taking 250, their metabolism may be different, their genetic profile may be different, whatever. More than likely, maybe they're getting a lot of choline already in their diet. They're eating a lot of eggs and, et cetera. Organ meats, which will come up a couple of times. Organ meats high in choline as well. I remember as a kid, my mom always used to make liver and onions, and I loved it. It takes a little bit getting used to, as my mom would say. She said it's an acquired taste. So it took a little bit getting acquired too, but now I love liver. It brings back memories on that. So that's the dosage range for choline bitartrate, 250 milligrams up to 3,000 milligrams a day. And with any supplements, of course, if you've checked with the doctor, run this by the doctor, I always start with a low dosage first to see how I react to it. And then I slowly build myself up, to make sure to try to limit the potential of negative side effects. There are negative side effects for all 3. I'm going to wait till the summary to talk about them because they apply to all 3. It doesn't really make sense to go over it 3 times. So I see Rodney has given the peace. So peace, Rodney. As I mentioned, Harmony was on here. For whatever reason, my chat in this Riverside is not coming up, so I need to check the settings to make sure that's all correct. But I have it on my phone so I can see when anybody chimes in here. And please feel free to ask questions on here, folks. This is, if anybody has any questions, this is why I do the live, just to get a chance to talk to y'all while I'm recording these episodes. I will do my best to answer. If I don't know the answer, then I will research and then get back to you and make another video. Give you a chance to answer your question. Maybe it's a question that multiple people have. So, and please feel free again to ask questions on the recorded. Hit me an email, Instagram, comment on the video, etc. So I think that is, I think that's it for choline bitartrate. That is the first supplement. Acme Supplements, choline bitartrate. Beautiful label. Again, I need to talk to Wile E. Coyote because it's got a berberine supplement facts panel for choline bitartrate. That's violating FDA guidelines. And if they advertise this, it may be violating FTC guidelines. So I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to recycle it later, folks. Recycle. All right, on to the next supplement. This is where we start to get into like even more juicy details. All right, folks. So then this is Sup Talk. This is going to be my segment. We'll call them Sup Talk, like supplement talks, deep science. Like I need to, in the recording, I need to like deep